I never thought I'd be one of those people writing my life story on Reddit, but here I am, typing out words I never imagined would apply to my marriage. For the longest time, I thought my wife and I had something special, something solid. You know, the kind of relationship that made other people envious. Now, I'm not so sure if we ever had that. Maybe I was just blind, or maybe I just wanted to believe we were different from the countless other couples that drift apart over time. To be clear, this isn't some rage-fueled rant about how horrible my wife is or how I'm a victim. It's way more complicated than that. There's a lot of love here, a lot of history, and a lot of mistakes on both sides. But if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love isn't always enough to keep people together. And sometimes the one you trust the most is the one who can hurt you in ways you never saw coming. This story starts about a year ago. My wife, Sarah, and I had been married for 6 years at that point and together for 9. We met in college. She was studying marketing and I was majoring in finance. From the moment we met, I was hooked. She had this energy about her, this magnetic personality that drew people in. I couldn't believe my luck when she chose me. We moved in together right after graduation, got married 2 years later, and began building our life together. For the first few years, everything was great. We were both working decent jobs, taking vacations, and enjoying the whole young couple phase. But as the years went by, something shifted. It wasn't drastic, just little things that slowly piled up. At first, it was the way we started drifting into our own worlds after work. She'd be on her phone or binge watching Netflix while I was in my home office, buried in spreadsheets or online poker games. The spark, as cliche as it sounds, started to fizzle out. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was perfect. I could have been more present, more emotionally available. Maybe I took her for granted. But despite the occasional distance between us, I never stopped loving her. I never stopped wanting to make our marriage work. I thought that's what she wanted too. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was a Thursday night, one of those nights where we barely said 2 words to each other over dinner. I was scrolling through my phone when Sarah looked up at me, her face tense with something I couldn't quite place. "We need to talk," she said, setting her fork down on her plate. My stomach dropped. In every relationship, those 4 words are like a trigger for panic. I'd been dreading a conversation like this for months, sensing that something was off, but not wanting to confront it. "What's up?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice betrayed the knot forming in my throat. She hesitated, fiddling with her napkin, then finally said, "Have you ever thought about opening our relationship?" It felt like someone punched me in the gut. I wasn't sure I'd heard her right at first. "Wait, what?" I asked, blinking in confusion. She started explaining, talking about how long we'd been together, how maybe we needed to explore other options, how we could still love each other while seeing other people. She mentioned how common open relationships were becoming, how some couples thrived after introducing new partners into their lives. I just sat there, stunned, trying to process what she was saying. My first instinct was to say no. Absolutely not. I wasn't interested in seeing other people, and I sure as hell didn't want her doing it either. But then she hit me with the guilt trip. She said she wasn't trying to hurt me, that she loved me and just wanted to feel alive again. She said she needed this for herself, to grow as a person, and that if I really loved her, I'd at least consider it. Looking back, I realized how manipulative that was, but in the moment, I felt trapped. I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't want to seem controlling or possessive. So after hours of back and forth, I reluctantly agreed. We set some rules: complete transparency, regular check-ins, no serious emotional attachments. I figured if this was what she needed to be happy, I could handle it. The first few weeks were rough. Sarah threw herself into dating apps like it was a new hobby. She was going out more, dressing up in ways I hadn't seen in years, and coming home late. When I asked her about the guys she was meeting, she kept things vague, saying they were just fun, and that it wasn't anything serious. I, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well with the whole thing. I tried going on a couple of dates, but they were awkward and forced. I didn't want to be with anyone else, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying my own values. I thought that maybe, over time, I'd get used to it. Spoiler alert, I didn't. About 2 months in, I started noticing a pattern. There was one guy, let's call him Derek, that Sarah seemed to be seeing more than the others. At first, she mentioned him in passing, like he was just another casual fling. But soon, it became clear that this was more than that. We'd talk about him with this spark in her eyes, a spark I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. I confronted her about it one night, asking if she was getting too attached. She brushed it off, saying I was overreacting. But I knew there was more to it. Then one night I got a message that confirmed my worst fears. It was from Sarah's best friend, Emma. Emma and I had never been particularly close, but we got along well enough. Her message was short but direct. I'm sorry, but you deserve to know. Sarah has been seeing Derek for months way before she brought up the open relationship. She's been cheating on you. My world collapsed in that moment. I called Emma, demanding answers, and she told me everything. Sarah and Derek had been involved long before the whole open relationship discussion. Asking for an open marriage was just Sarah's way of justifying her affair. She didn't want to stop seeing him, but she also didn't want to lose me. I confronted Sarah that night. I didn't yell or scream, I was too numb for that. When I told her what I knew, she just broke down crying. She admitted everything. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen, that it started as a fling, but then she developed feelings for him. She thought that by opening the relationship, she could have both of us. I didn't know what to say. There's no handbook for how to deal with something like that. I wanted to leave, but I also didn't want to throw away nearly a decade of my life. So like an idiot, I agreed to try to work it out. We went to therapy, we talked about rebuilding trust, about forgiveness, about starting over. But the truth was, I couldn't forgive her, not really. Every time she went out, every time she was on her phone, I wondered if she was still talking to him. I checked her messages, I tracked her location, and it drove me insane. The trust was gone, and without trust, a relationship can't survive. About 6 months after that initial confrontation, I made the hardest decision of my life. I asked for a divorce. Sarah was heartbroken, but she knew it was coming. We had become strangers living under the same roof, but a million miles apart. Now, I'm sitting in a small apartment on the other side of town trying to rebuild my life. Some days are better than others, but the pain is still there. I love Sarah with everything I had, and it still kills me to think about how things turned out. Looking back, I realize I should have trusted my gut from the beginning. I should have stood my ground when she first brought up the open relationship instead of compromising my own values. I let my fear of losing her cloud my judgment, and in the end, it cost me everything. So there it is. My story. It's messy, it's painful, but it's real. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never ignore your instincts and never let someone guilt you into something you're not comfortable with. Love is important, but respect and trust are essential. Without them, everything falls apart.